So yes, there will be a copy of the recording of the session available about a week afterwards, and it will go on the UK ICF Bath and Bristol Group YouTube channel, where you can find lots of other recordings of other sessions as well. We typically record our panel discussions and our workshops. We don't record the MCC demos because of confidentiality. So just bearing in mind, if you are bringing anything into the space this evening in the group shared space that we'll spend the majority of the time in, for your managing your own disclosure with things, and respectfully asking all of you to also treat the space as you would do a coaching session with a client, and not taking anything out of this space, but at the same time it will be in the public domain somewhat, so just having that at the back of your mind. We will give you the opportunity to go into breakout rooms a little later on, with the option of being in a breakout room for self-reflection, not for verbal sharing. But for those of you that appreciate the opportunity to chat through what you're making of tonight's topic, there will be that opportunity. And I want to reassure you that the breakout rooms are not recorded. So we've started the recording, but it's just for the main panel. So a really warm welcome to tonight's Coaching Quiet Strength topic. We've got three amazing panelists that will all introduce themselves very, very shortly. You'll see Nadia Finer, Sarah Manley and Pete Mosley are here with me this evening. They are all authors of books relating to the topic that we're going to be discussing tonight. And those of you that have attended one of these events before, from the sense of a panel, you'll know that it's very much a spontaneous live conversation that we attempt to stimulate. So it's not a scripted discussion. There are some sort of guiding questions that I have that are there in the background to support our conversation tonight, but we're really keen to get you all involved as well. And so feel free to use the chat function to put questions, reflections in that space. We will, after the breakouts, also specifically ask you if there are any questions you'd like to come off mute and ask. What we'll do for the duration of the conversation between the panelists is your questions will be there, and then we can glance to those and weave them in. But then we'll very specifically ask you if you would like to come off mute and ask questions when we bring you back from breakout rooms. The breakout rooms we will open about an hour into this evening's panel. So on the hour, in just under an hour, we will move to that. For any of those of you that haven't met me before, my name's Jane Morris. I'm based in the UK, in the Bristol area. I am the group lead for the Bristol and Bath ICF local chapter group. We meet monthly. We meet like this online for 3 sessions, and then we meet in person for the 4th session on a sort of rolling basis. We usually have one workshop style session, then a MCC demo, and then a panel discussion like this one. And then we meet in person, alternating between Bath and Bristol. So our next in-person meet is actually in September. We're taking August off for holidays. And so we'll be back in person in Bristol this time round in September, and I'll share the details in the chat about that at the end of the session as well. I am an MCC level ICF accredited coach. I'm also accredited by the EMCC and the AC as well. This group is welcoming of all coaches, no matter what affiliation, no matter how long you've been coaching, and whether you're just curious about coaching, you're also welcome here. I have a specialism in burnout coaching, and I train coaches to be general coaches as well as already qualified coaches to train specifically with a burnout specialism. I'm also an ICF assessor, supervisor and mentor coach. So that's enough about me. I'm going to hand over to Pete and then Nadia and Sarah to introduce yourselves and let everyone know a little bit about who you are and why you're here.
Thanks, Jane. Well, first of all, it's really lovely to be here with you all tonight, and lovely to see some familiar faces in the room, friends and people I've taught, and goodness knows, connections from a long time ago as well. So it's brilliant to be here. In terms of introduction, I'll kind of stick with the stuff that's really relevant to our session tonight. Yes, I am the author of a number of books relating to quiet. I first started treating quietness and introversion, although that's a term I don't really like very much. When I was a creative mentor working with Arts Council, I was a mentor in the creative industries for 15 years. And I noticed that an awful lot of my clients were great, brilliant, in fact, at what they did, but just not that good at sticking their head above the parapet and promoting what they did. So the first book I wrote, The Art of Shouting Quietly, was really aimed at those people to help them find a voice, really, in a way that would help them cut through the noise and clutter of social media and all of the other kind of marketing channels out there. As time moved on and I developed in my coaching practice, I teach coaching with Barefoot Coaching Limited and have done for quite a long time now. And I delve deeper into the whole notion of quiet and where does it come from? I'm actually really interested in what makes people quiet. So I think some of us are kind of born that way. There's certainly a genetic element to it. There are folk like myself who are quiet because of life events and who maybe are quieter because of trauma or something like that. And then there are folk who go quiet in the moment and then all of a sudden they're not quiet anymore, you know. And I think there's a lot of so-called extroverts that go quiet too and can be quiet for quite a long time. So I wrote the next book, which was A Quiet Person's Guide to Life and Work, for quiet people themselves. And then I realized the need after I'd completed that for a similar book, almost exactly the same book, in fact, but for leaders and managers of quiet people. And that was published about 3 months ago, the Leader's Guide to Working with Quiet People. So I come into this both with a kind of subject interest, but it's been a narrative through my life. I was a shy kid, had a couple of childhood illnesses that kind of knocked me off balance. Took a lot of time for me to build my confidence. So it's almost a semi-autobiographical journey for me as well. So I'm very pleased to be here, and I'll throw in what I can that will be helpful along the way. Thanks, Jane, for the opportunity to do that.
Thank you so much. It's such a joy to have you with us. Thank you. Nadia, hey.
Hello. Yeah, I'm Nadia, and thank you for having me. I'm a bit in awe of Sarah and Pete, to be honest. So yeah, feeling a little bit kind of shy and nervous just to be here. And Jane and I have known each other for a long time, so yeah, I'm excited to be here. My speciality is shyness, and I come at it from a personal kind of angle. I've experienced it a lot myself as a kid and still as an adult. And I started to talk about it in relation to my own experience and was invited from there to go on the radio, Radio 4 a few years ago, and that was kind of how it all began. So I was talking about my own kind of experience of shyness, and then I was invited to write a book. And it kind of went from there really, where so I wrote Shy and Mighty, which is a book about shyness for grown-ups, and then I was asked to write a similar thing for kids. So I wrote Shy and Mighty for kids, and then very recently I published a book of stories about shy and quiet people who've achieved amazing things, and that's called Quiet Riot. So that came out the dog might bark. Hang on 1 second. He's just gonna go up there. Come on. That came out the other week, actually, so that was very exciting. And my speciality, I guess, recently has moved more in the direction of working with children. So I go into a lot of schools and talk about what shyness is, how it feels, how it's okay to be shy sometimes, and how to overcome it. I find that teachers don't really understand it, which makes me, well, I don't really get that they don't understand it. It seems fairly fundamental to me, but anyway, and kids don't obviously ever talk about it. So yeah, it's like I'm on this kind of mission now, and I'm just kind of working my way around the country, I guess, going into school by school. It's very slow progress, but it's also really adorable and cute, and I feel like it helps a lot of people at an early stage where maybe that sort of intervention could change their life going forward. Well, it does in a really good way. And so yeah, I'm kind of going in early, and then Pete's got the other end covered when like in work and more grown up.
Thank you so much, Nadia.
You're welcome.
I've seen some of your recent posts about Quiet Right. I just love the name of that book and the idea that you're taking it into schools. And I could just imagine the part in the children who would love to be involved in a riot, but don't know how to bring their voice out to answer a question in class, let alone to do. I imagine it really appealing. So yeah, I'd love to be a fly on the wall in one of your sessions in schools. I bet it's fabulous. And Sarah, welcome.
Thank you, Jane. Absolute pleasure to be here. Really looking forward to the conversation. I always learn so much in these sessions as well, so really looking forward. So my story is a little different. I feel like the new kid on the block, actually, in lots of ways. So I had a 20-year corporate career that I pivoted from only 2 years ago. So I was working in some big international healthcare organizations, traveling the world, doing all kinds of wonderful things. But for at least the first half of that, I really felt like a square peg in a round hole. I was quite good at my job, but I could never quite work out how everybody else was so visible and so successful and just able to lead these big workshops and do these big presentations, that everybody was just hanging on every word they were saying. And I couldn't do those things. And I used to get lots of feedback saying, but Sarah, you just need to speak up more. But Sarah, you just need to be more visible. All these sorts of things, except for no one ever said you just need to be more yourself. And for me, that was a huge tipping point. I stepped into my first director role. I was drowning. I might have needed your services, Jane, for burnout coaching at that point, had I known you. Because I was putting it all out there, all my energy, all the time, to try and be somebody that I just wasn't. Instead of feeling confident and secure that I could be successful just by being myself. And at that point, I was gifted a book called Quiet by Susan Cain, which I'm sure fellow panelists definitely know. Many of you may be on the call tonight now as well. And thank goodness, because that was really like a chicken soup for my soul. That's the way I could describe it. I lapped up every word of finally somebody can explain why I'm finding some of these things so challenging. And it gave me permission to be me for the first time, actually. So I was given the gift of redundancy 2 years ago. So I decided, right, I'm going to hang up my suitcase, disconnected from that, and didn't know what I was going to do next. And then I started writing my book. I only have one book, so I'm behind. So I only have one for now, which is Quiet Catalyst, The Introvert's Guide to Thriving in Your Career. And I never intended to write it, but in some ways I think it was a bit of a therapy moment of decompressing from that 20 years of square peg to round hole, figures it out, and now I'd like to share it with other people. So the book was kind of designed to be the book I needed after reading Quiet, like the so what now for corporate life, like how to apply these things in corporate life. So it's kind of a self-coaching book, lots of hints and tips and self-coaching in there. And it's been a real joy, I have to say. Off the back of that, lots of people asked me to do talks, which I thought, gosh, why are you asking an introvert to do talks? But I've built the muscle and I've learned to love it. I've learned to enjoy it. And then off the back of that, I offer coaching and mentoring for people who I wish I'd had in my life earlier in my corporate career. So that's me in a nutshell. And yeah, looking forward to the conversation. Thanks for the invitation, Jane.
Thank you, Sarah. It's really so fabulous having you here, and so fabulous that you gone for it to write something that feels like the next step that you were missing. Because I think when we write the book that we needed but couldn't find, or that we still feel we need and can't find, it makes for such a powerful book. And I'm sure those that come across it who have had similar experiences and journeys and been stuck will find that so impactful. I love the way you said about the muscle that you've built to be able to then bring yourself out of yourself to do some of the things that you've been invited to do, where you thought, why would you ask me to do that? Because I think as a starting point, it places that inspiration in the space that there are things that, especially when we're coaching people. We're going to be talking today about how do we, really include everyone so quieter voices don't feel like they're being overshadowed, and quieter voices can find their voices. But equally, the idea, not that you need to change to be louder so that you're like someone else, but actually that there are parts you can draw on of yourself and build certain things that you, because you want to, that are like a muscle. I instantly thought back to my time in school and how absolutely petrified and terrified I always was when a teacher asked me to do something that involved speaking in front of other people. It was like my absolute worst nightmare. And quite often, because of the kind of peer group I had at the time, I was the only person that would have risen to do something, mainly because I felt bad for the teacher that nobody else would do it, and I was probably the only person that they could ask. But that really did mean me taking myself out of my comfort zone and doing things that have actually led to then being able to do a group like this, which I remember being in a competition for public speaking and being the one person that got up and couldn't remember what the topic was, let alone what I'd prepared to say about it, and just feeling like I wanted the ground to open up and swallow me. And and it is a muscle, because thanks to those awful situations, I am now more able to put myself in front of people and remember what I've got to say, most of the time, not always. So I'm wondering if you might, just to get us started, like to speak a bit more to that and to what the process of writing that book has brought you for the part inside of you that previously was maybe quieter than it is now.
Yeah, no, very happy to share, and happy to hear this muscle building resonates. I think, the starting point for the book was a brainstorm by myself in Cafe Nero in Reading, not the most inspirational of places, but I was going to a retreat. So, I thought at the age of 40 something, in redundancy, this is what I should go off and do. Go and do a retreat. So live in a yurt in Wales. It was only a long weekend. There was a compost toilet, so I couldn't last very long. And it was a yoga, writing, and walking retreat. So 3 of my favorite things. And I was panicking the weekend before because I'm not a writer. I didn't have any writing ideas. So there I was in Cafe Nero, having a brainstorm by myself, thinking I'm going to look like a complete twit, arriving at this retreat with nothing to write about and nothing to say. Of course, when I got there, it was completely fine. Everybody was lovely. But the post-it note I walked into that retreat with was the idea of my big sister at work. So who is the voice that I wish I'd had access to earlier in my career? And the process of writing, when people ask me, like, what was it like to write the book? For me, it was the most joyful experience I think I've ever had. And I say it knowing that, the writing process, all the editing and stuff is mega hard, mega hard. But the way that I wrote was almost like a download of, here is everything I needed to say to myself, to others, probably for 20 years, but I'd kept it in here somewhere. And there's lots of stories that didn't make the book for different reasons, but there are some parts in there that actually, until I wrote them down, I didn't quite realize the impact some situations had on me. So when you talk, for example, about, in class being fearful to speak up, I never actually really had that at school. I was not a shy kid. I had confidence. I wasn't feeling fear of judgment from others. It wasn't until I got to work where the competition was much clearer, like who was being promoted, who was getting bonuses, awards, this sort of thing, that suddenly opening my mouth around a table where I'm a reflective person. What does everybody think? I'm thinking. I'm not speaking. And I used to feel that judgment of, I've not said anything, I've still not said anything, I've still not said anything. And that's where the confidence, I think, started to dip over time. And by writing about some of those things in the book, it became so much clearer. Oh, that's where that came from. I never realized. And I think that's the privilege as a coach also now in the work that we each do, is helping the person to think about, where did those things come from? Where did some of those events trigger, spark something that happened for the detriment of how you now feel, but also for the positive of how you now feel. So yeah, the book was a huge joy and a huge catalyst for some of that self-understanding, and feel very privileged to be able to share it with others now as well.
Thank you, Sarah. I like notice a massive like fizzing in my body of the excitement of the work that you do and the passion you have for it, and the bringing to life of stories like that others can resonate to, that especially considering that our voice becoming quieter isn't necessarily something that we've always struggled with, and might be something that we experience a season of, you know, a change in ourselves with, and sort of finding our voice again in the way that you've described. Yeah, it's really, it's still staying with me now. I can still feel the fizzing. At one stage when you were speaking, I was drawn to recall something that Pete said really early into this evening, which was about the label introvert. So I'm wondering, Pete, if you could speak a little bit to that.
Consummate professional I am, started speaking while I'm still muted, but I'll answer the question now. For me, the process of writing the Quiet Person's Guide really kicked in when I realized that I'd been happily wearing the label introvert for quite a long time, because it seemed to explain an awful lot of me and how I showed up in the world. And then I realized the way I show up in the world and the way that I am has got nothing to do with introversion whatsoever. And that set me off on a whole new journey of discovery, really. Confidence and one's ability to speak up is context dependent, of course. If you're in a friendly space surrounded by people that you like and you're talking about something you know about, it's much, much easier to speak up. Not so in other contexts, perhaps. I also recognize that if that was the case for me, it's probably the case for an awful lot of other people who are maybe wandering around with the badge. I was an INFJT. That's the most rare introvert there is. I think there's only 2% of us, he said, not really believing it. But I think to a certain extent, these definitions are really useful as a starting point, not a destination. The thing that triggered the inquiry really was I'd been wearing the introvert label for a while, but there were still things that were troubling me about my inability to show up in other ways in different circumstances. I'll be perfectly open about this. I did some therapy and discovered that I'd been living most of my adult life with complex PTSD, and I didn't know about it. Absolutely no knowledge of that whatsoever. And that had my behaviors through that were mimicking what you get when you classify yourself as an introvert. And that went, oh, right, okay, if that's true for me, what about all the other people? And then I started delving into this thing, where does quietness come from? And there are just so many reasons that people are quiet, or become quiet in the moment. And some of it is genetic, some of it is familial, some of it is to do with the way they're brought up, some of it is to do with context at work, perhaps, and the interrelations between all of those things too. It's a many-faceted thing, and it's utterly fascinating. There's an iceberg diagram in the Quiet Person's Guide where I contrast how non-introverted people view introverts above the waterline and what's actually going on beneath the surface, because chronic pain can make you quiet. You know, living in a house that's disturbed and dysfunctional can make you quiet. Chronic debt can make you quiet. Many things along within the range of neurotypicality and neurodivergence can make you quiet. There's just so many things, dozens and dozens of things. So I spent about 1.5 years delving into those things to really produce a book that I felt would be of practical use to people that maybe had got to the point where the introvert label really didn't explain stuff enough. And I've designed it as a workbook so people can delve into things and play around with ideas and arrive at a kind of a mix that suits themselves and all that.
Thank you, Pete. I'm really curious in the coaching space when somebody comes into a conversation with you and refers to themselves as an introvert. What typically happens next in your inquiry with them?
Oh, I'm fairly open about my distrust of labeling. There's a wonderful quote by Irving Yalom with psychotherapists that labels limit vision. And I think they can sometimes. They limit your imagination and where you can go with all of this thinking. What I would like to do and what I do with the people I coach is say, right, well, where did you get your label from? You know, was it Myers-Briggs or somewhere else? What does that tell you? How has that been helpful to you in the past? How might it be helpful to you in the future? And where would you like to go on this journey of exploration to explore all the other things that might be influencing the things that you're maybe not too happy about, or where you feel you're underachieving? And it might be public speaking, you know. They might be actually thinking about public speaking in the wrong way and terrified for all the wrong reasons. And then you can work past that. So yeah, the main thing is a starting point.
Yeah, I'm really hearing where things can be useful and then where they can really get in our way as well. And having even putting together the language around this evening's discussion, I felt limited by vocabulary in order to, you know, not to label, and yet also recognizing that the use of the label means people know, oh, I'm coming to a topic about this broad thing. So yeah, interesting. Thank you so much, Pete. Nadia, I'm really curious. We touched on a little bit around language when you first introduced yourself and the titles of your book, because the language you used for the titles I was so struck by as you brought them in. I'm wondering, yeah, what you've maybe been reflecting on hearing Sarah and Pete share. What's there for you?
Well, I think firstly the moment that kind of inspired the whole thing came to mind for me, which was actually a panel discussion. I was on a live panel at an event for teenage girls, and I was sort of just sat there and I didn't really say very much, and I kept thinking, oh, I really need to say something. And the other people on the panel were quite forthright, I suppose, quite loud. They seemed to just sort of grab the microphone and just say what they had on their mind. And I just sat there thinking, oh God, this is getting embarrassing now. I need to say something. And I was looking at the audience and I just thought, the thing that struck me was that you don't, and I kind of use this line sometimes now, is that you don't hear from people like me very often. So you just don't, because I would happily just sit there and not say anything. And then I looked at all these girls, there was hundreds of them, because it was at Chelsea Football Stadium, sort of it was a bit of a weird area, but it was rammed. And I just thought, wonder how many of these girls feel shy as well, you know, loads probably. And I'm not sure it's fair for them to only hear from a percentage of the population. They're not hearing, like, it's not representative. So I really do need to say something. And then when I actually managed to kind of wrestle the microphone off of one of the others and say something, I think I just said what I needed to say in a kind of authentic and quiet way, not in a kind of totally alpha sort of, you know, I'm awesome, be like me kind of way. And it seemed to resonate with people. And then I thought, hang on, okay, I think I need to do something about this. You know, I'm shy. I never tell anyone that I'm shy. Why is that? And I think feeling shy, it's not something I'd wear a badge that says, yay, I'm shy. Although weirdly someone did send me a badge and I wouldn't wear it, but anyway. So then I just thought it's funny because introverts are happy to talk about being introvert. They love it. They're like in groups for it. They own it. They're really empowered by it. And I asked a question in one of these groups about being shy, and then loads of people got very cross and had a go at me because they were not shy, they were introverts. And I thought, oh dear God, what's happened here? And so I was just kind of thinking about how I felt, how you didn't hear from people like me very often, how I could easily have said nothing. The girls wouldn't have heard me. And then when I did try and talk about it, I was kind of crushed by some weird reaction to it. So then I just thought, I think this needs to be talked about. I think this is a thing that is not just impacting me. So that was kind of that's how I started. And the writing has always come from, I guess I'm lucky because publishers contact me and have said, will you write a book for us? So I haven't luckily had to like pitch my work to publishers because I just wouldn't have done it. So in a way, that's been a relief. Yeah, and also once I'd written the books, the thing I struggle with is the self-promotion part. So I mean, I don't necessarily think of myself as a writer, but I've got my books in front of me, so I guess I must be. But I just find the whole kind of talking about your work thing sort of unnecessary. I don't really want to do it. I'd rather just do my work, do my things, help people, but not have to kind of big myself up or show up or, you know, speak my truth or whatever people say. I don't really like doing that. So yeah, I guess that's my take on it. Oh, and the labeling, back to that, it's awkward because like you say, like, well, with kids especially, I don't want to say, oh, they're a shy kid, because you don't want to label a kid as being shy, but at the same time, I say, if you are feeling shy, or you have some shy feelings, I try and say it like that, but then the parents come to me and say, my child is shy, or teachers have said my child. So it's one of those things, it's like you want it to be not a negative, but you can't really say it because it's a label. So then I try and talk about it in a positive way when I say the word shy, and then slightly reword it so that I'm not labeling anybody as shy because I don't upset people.
Brilliant, brilliant, Nadia. I just want to pick up on that thing about the messaging about shyness. My mum always used to introduce me as a child. This is Peter, he is shy. And she did that for about 6 years. So it's inevitable that I've grown up believing I'm a shy person. Utterly, you build your picture of yourself through a process of osmosis, the things that you pick up from everybody else's around you. So you end up with a label, whether you chose it for yourself or not. I love your take on that, Nadia. Thank you.
Thanks, Pete. Pete's my hero, so I'm very happy when he says things like that.
I'd love to pick up on something, Pete, earlier that you also said, and it was about when people, if they come to speak about something that and these are not your words, I'm paraphrasing now because I didn't capture them or anything in the moment, that if they're talking about something that they're actually passionate about and interested in, was one aspect that I think you touched on. The other, that in community with, or in surrounded by other individuals, and again I'm paraphrasing, but that they feel safe with. So it's one thing that the teacher picking on you in the class and saying, right, what do you think, cold calling they call it these days, and it's another thing that child maybe being at an activity group that they've chosen to be at, and in the context of that someone says, oh, would you like to tell everyone what it was that you did at the weekend, and they find that they're in a group of shared space with friends where they don't feel like they're going to be pulled apart with whatever they say, and they can kind of come out with it. I'm wondering if there might be a little bit more to that would be useful to share in this space, Pete. Oh, you're on mute again.
Yeah, I think the thing about being in a safe feeling context, and with friends and doing something together with people that really interests you and absorbs you helps you become less aware of the embarrassment and stuff. I mean, I used to play in a kind of little band of musicians in my teen, folk music in Glasgow, in the surrounding villages. And I didn't feel a shred of shame or shyness or embarrassment while I was doing that. As soon as I came off stage, a shutter came down, and if anybody tried to talk to me after, I couldn't do it. I fled outside, and needed 15 minutes to lie down and recover from it. And to a certain extent, I'm still the same way, but it's about finding those places where you come alive and presenting yourself from there, rather than just following everybody through the usual social media channels and trying to mimic what everybody else is doing and somehow survive that way. I think by playing on your uniqueness, finding your point of strength and going with that, it may take you a little longer, but you'll come out of the end of it with your integrity intact, and possibly better results, I think.
Thank you.
I really agree with what Pete's saying here, just to chime in terms of finding that place where you feel safe. And often for introverts, I'm more keen on the term introvert, but maybe there's a debate there. But finding that space where often it's with fewer people, even if you're playing to an audience or something, but in a smaller group, but playing to your strengths, and then really finding what energizes you. So as Pete was saying, where are the things that really charge you up? And I think it's often a topic that we can overlook when we're talking about strengths-based coaching. We're talking about confidence or something else. And many of the people I work with, I'll be curious to hear from the others as well. Actually, once you start to uncover what's going on, people are at a point of exhaustion by trying to keep pace with somebody else's drumbeats a lot of the time. And we do a lot of work in terms of actually what does recharge and energize you. And people will say, oh, I just need to collapse on the sofa, I end up binging Netflix, or I get to the weekend and I just want to bolt the door and not talk to anybody. I feel like being a hermit. But of course, life often doesn't let us do those things because we've got all these other responsibilities. So we never quite manage to recharge properly. So I get quite obsessed by managing personal energy, managing personal battery, and not helping people to set those boundaries for not over giving all the time and letting your energy flow out, flow out, flow out, but finding those things that you love doing. And often they are in those surprising places, like Pete's example of, being on a band in stage. You might not at first, as a quieter, more reserved person, think that would be the thing, but it can be in those surprising places. It's not always that solo walk somewhere. Yes, that can be great, but sometimes we need to stir the pot in different ways. So I often like working with people to set a bit of a challenge for finding new and curious ways to, boost that battery.
I think that it's interesting how sort of society has been designed by a small number of people, it feels, in a way that suits them. And you start to kind of question everything and think, why is school the way school is? And why are we having teachers be the way that the teachers are being? And why do we have to stand at the front of the class and present our work? And whose idea was oracy, where some poor kid in year 7 has to stand up and present in front of 150 people when they've never spoken to more than like 4 people at a time in their life? And then, why is it that, if you're gonna, I don't know, give evidence in a trial, you have to stand up in front of a whole bunch of people and talk on the spot and be questioned? Or why do you have to, if you want to change the way we work as a society and get into politics, you have to sort of enter some crazy kind of popularity contest and talk in front. I don't know, I just question everything and think none of those things really feel like they work for me particularly, and it makes me think that you end up with a slightly skewed version of society. And could things be different? yeah, so there's just, once you start questioning it, you think, okay, well, what can I do to change things? And I try to empower people, kids as well, to change their world and make it work better for them rather than always fitting into other people's idea of how things should be. I think I understand that talking to other humans is important, but there are other ways of communicating too, so I think we should bear those in mind. And then whoever the hell came up with social media and decided that we needed to sort of do that all the time, I think was mad, and that doesn't really work for a lot of people. So I just lately just feel like forget about that. I'm not really interested in it, and it's not I just get someone else to do my stuff, and so I don't have to do it. So there's that. Um, and what I thought what was really interesting is because I think about bravery muscles a lot, and I talk to the kids about that. And one of the things that has helped me a lot is boxing. And I think it is surprising, but weirdly, like when I'm boxing, I don't feel shy in my gym around all these huge men with tattoos. I feel pretty safe. I feel very strong, and I do a lot of like the demos and stuff, and do brave things, and I feel fine. And I think that actually, like you say, it's about finding your own place where you feel good and being around people who support you and have got your back, and then you feel like you can go on to do all kinds of amazing things. And I think the physicality of it, I really like the idea that, especially with kids, that they're going to do something that makes them feel physically stronger, because I think when you feel physically stronger, you often feel mentally stronger too. So yeah, I've waffled about different things there, but that was my view.
I love there's a kind of quietly subversive theme about what you're talking about and the routes of inquiry that you're taking and questioning everything. I love that. And I think quiet people often have a unique viewpoint on things that they've gathered through the process of having to struggle a bit, which places them in a unique position to present themselves to the world slightly differently, with a willingness not to do what everybody else does. And I think that's a huge strength, and hopefully we'll talk about that later in the call.
I want to make sure that we capture that and that we do. So part of me is tempted to go straight to that. And then part of me is wondering about what this means in the coaching space and what this means when you're in the role of a coach, one-to-one and with groups. So up to you where we go next, but that's what I'm noticing is there, and would be perhaps useful to the wider group for us to touch on. I'm going to attempt to keep up with the chat as well. I'm not very good at multi-focusing, multitasking, so I'm transfixed on each of you as speakers and then noticing there's things going on down the side as well, but don't want to draw myself away and miss something. Who would like to pick up, and what would you like to pick up? The can go in any which direction.
Would it be useful just to share a little bit about my experience of group coaching?
Yeah, wonderful.
With mixed groups of leaders and the quieter people in their teams.
Did come to mind.
I did. I've just finished a 3-year commitment with Natural England, which is an arm of DEFRA, Department for the Environment, Food and Fisheries, and something else I've forgotten. And they employ a huge number of quiet people because they're the people that are out on the land tending trees and looking after fish and making sheep are sheared properly, and the farmers are all right. And when they get back in the office, they have a terrible, terrible, terrible time adjusting, and their managers get terribly, terribly frustrated because they want to communicate, but there's a real clash of a group of people that really just want to get on with what they're doing quietly, and the managers who need to perhaps herding might be the right word, herd them into a coherent group where they can all be facing in the same direction and doing the right thing. And finding myself in a group like that, inviting people into that space to say, let's do a bit of group coaching around this. First of all, it's the first time for some leaders that they've ever been in a room where the majority of the other participants have been introverts or quiet people. And that's a revelation, I find, for a lot of them. There's definitely a need to get more kind of socially energetic people, as I call them, in rooms with people who have less social energy, perhaps. And get them talking about what the reality of it is, because they don't understand that the pressure that the quiet people are under when they come into an office environment. And yes, they may be familiar with the mechanisms of it, but what they don't ever have enough of is time, because quiet people tend to take more time to process things. They feel safe when they have time to think. The managers, on the other hand, don't feel safe when a lot of time is seemingly being wasted by all these other people having to or wanting to think about things, because safety to them is about making rapid decisions and moving on, implementing policy or making profits or whatever it is. So trying to get them to understand that by failing to create a safe culture where the quiet people can speak up, they're absolutely not getting the return on investment from the people they're actually paying fairly good salaries to, because they're not creating the space for them to truly interact. Or they're just driving them so hard or forcing them to play a role to the point where they become burned out or disinterested or disenfranchised or whatever. So to me, there's a really dynamic conversation in there. And what's really happening here? What simple adjustments can you make to workplace culture just to give these folks more time to prepare, to begin to understand what they want to say, to get into the room, to have support to say it? And there's lots of interesting work around that. To maybe leave a meeting not having made their mind up yet about what's really going on, and to have the time to make the mind up before they take part in the decision. I interviewed a senior manager from Coutts Bank, and they've actually implemented a process where they hold the dopamine-driven alpha thinkers back until all the quieter people have made their mind up, and then they bring them all together again and make the decision. And as far as she's concerned, it's kind of revolutionized the results that they get and the quality of the thinking that goes on. So you make a bad decision, you often make it quickly, don't you? You know. So just something to throw into the pot there. What if we just gave everybody a dollop more time? How big an impact would that simple act have on the quiet people in the world?
I love that, Pete. I work with kids. I do a program in a secondary school, and I've been going there for like 3 years now. So it's been really interesting to see the progress. It's a unique thing. I don't do it in any other schools. This is called the Shine program, and I think what's really valuable is that this is the first time these quieter kids who are selected, like the teachers put them forward for it, the first time that they've ever been in a room with other quiet people. And I mean, I could almost think I could do nothing and just sort of get some biscuits or something, and they'd be really happy because they feel like they're not alone and they're not weird and there's like nothing wrong with them and they're actually fine the way they are. But also we do work on things so they can't just eat biscuits, but I help them to sort of appreciate the things, their strengths, you know, help them appreciate their strengths, get them hopefully talking to each other. Some of them don't say anything usually in school, and you realise that school is so incredibly noisy, and they're just one of 30 people in a class, and it's very easy to say nothing, and that can just continue day after day, and they feel very disconnected and maybe don't have many friends, and a lot of things are very challenging for them. So yeah, it sort of seems counterintuitive to bring quiet people into a room together and sort of have a little workshop with them, because they probably don't really want to do it at first. They're thinking, oh God, seems awkward. Why would I go to that? And the idea of talking to other people, not so much fun, but I think the feedback is always really strong and it does sort of change people's lives. So I think perhaps even if you don't want to do it to start with, it's a good idea. And I haven't figured out how to roll it out beyond the one school at this point because I have to manage my social battery. But yeah, I think kind of getting in the habit of having quieter spaces so it's not just, you know, a one quiet person in a room full of louder people struggling, giving them the opportunity to be with others who feel the same way is, I think, a gift.
Yeah, I'd love to build on this if I can, Nadia, and a couple of things Pete said as well. I think later in my corporate career, when I actually can say became a proud introvert, I started to not only have that degree of self-awareness, but also appreciation for what I brought to the table, which in many places I think was the missing piece of the jigsaw in a team. Like you say, that quieter reflection of joining the dots that other people might miss. And what I learned to do was to share that with other quieter people. So I would take the opportunity of being a senior director on the stage to share a bit with people what it took to get there, what it takes out of me to be there, and how I manage my social battery, as we're calling it, afterwards as well. And it was quite vulnerable to do that. And a few times I thought, gosh, what am I doing? This could be career suicide. But the truth is, people found it really important to start sharing that in such a confident way, not in an excusing way, oh, I'm very sorry that, but in a confident way to share those things. And you would have people of lots of different levels coming and saying, just thank you for sharing that, and can we talk about that some more? So putting it out there, just as we've done today and as Pete and Nadia do all the time, to share those sorts of things and normalize it, for want of a nicer word, just to start saying there are other people like you know, going back to when I read that Susan Cain book, I'd never had that conversation with anybody before. I felt like I had it with her. So putting that on the table more often, I think, is super valuable. Going back also to Pete's points, I think, and Nadia mentioned this before, sometimes it feels like the world was created by a few people in a different way that doesn't work for half of us, if half of us are introverts or quieter people, statistically. And so I like to bring in some other tools, and they can be really simple things, like, and as Pete was saying, you know, with team coaching, okay, how do we want to operate as a team? And you start to decide, you know, how and when are we going to make decisions, etc. And one thing I'd love to build is this role of a meta role. And we started to implement this in our teams. So you have a kind of team charter of, you know, how do we agree to work and what should good look like when we're operating at our best? And these things slip because stereotypically the louder ones will start to get louder again and the quieter ones go, for goodness sake, and like, you know, we let them run. So the role of a meta is to give this person full permission at a break or at the end of the day to say, and here's what I saw about how we've worked together. And it helps pull everybody back on track. Are we actually doing what we say we would do to make space for quieter voices? And one of the techniques that I found works super well for that is reverse brainstorming in some ways. Brainstorming doesn't work if you're a quieter person, I think, because everybody just starts, and then how are you supposed to think and talk and everything else? So what I've often encouraged people to do is start with some solo brainstorming. I love a post-it note, big stationery fan. So brainstorm yourself first of all, and you end up with a little stack of post-its. And then often in corporate life, we go and stick them on a wall and then we have a conversation. But instead of jumping straight to that, let's have a conversation in pairs or even in a three. This does two things. One, it helps to amplify the idea with more people, but it also helps to warm up our voice. And I encourage lots of quieter, introverted people to warm up their voice before any kind of meeting and interaction. Because again, it's like warming the muscle. It feels easier to start speaking if you've already made some effort to do so. So doing that brainstorming as solo, duos or trios before you go into the bigger group helps people also advocate for your ideas. And before you know it, your voice is out there. Whose idea was that? Oh, it was Nadia's. Oh, it was Pete's. Ah, okay. And it helps with that visibility piece as well before you know it. So lots of tips and tricks we can weave in to help people. It's not all on their shoulders. You need to speak up more. You need to be louder. Let's shake the environment and the status quo to help release their voice as well.
Love that. I'm wondering what more we might be able to draw out in terms of the experience that Pete and Nadia have of things that they've used to support quieter voices in, I'm going to say, group spaces. So whether that's with teams or groups that of individuals that maybe didn't know each other before coming together necessarily, but where there's a dynamic that nonetheless starts to take shape quite quickly sometimes, because the loud voices are used to being loud voices, so they come in as loud voices, and the quiet voices stay quiet voices unless that person who holds the space notices and experiments with different ways to shake that up.
Would it be interesting to share with the group, Jane, the chat storming thing that we've used on the Barefoot programme? I wonder how many people have heard of that. It came to mind when Sarah was talking about brainstorming. So often if you've got a group of people and it's half and half, you know, of the kind of noisy folk and the quieter reflectors, if you ask people just to put a response in chat, one or two people do, but then everybody gets anchored on what's already there and makes a decision then about whether the contribution is equal to or better than or not as good as, and maybe the stream just peters out very quickly. If, on the other hand, you get people to type a few words in chat, but not hit the return button, just to keep them there until everybody's done that, and then you go 3, 2, 1 and ask everybody to press return at the same time, you get this instantaneous equality of results in the chat where nobody's anchored on what came first. And it's a brilliant technique for working with a mixed group, and it's especially brilliant for working with introverts, because you usually get 100% response to it. It's very rare not to get 100% response. It's very telling. And I often use that when I'm working, you know, in group coaching sessions with mixed groups. It also, and the other thing that I do a lot of is running group coaching sessions where the default is not to switch your camera on. The absolute opposite of what most managers would want. And I find that works really well as well.
Thank you, Pete. Something else. Oh, sorry, Nadia.
I was just going to say that I sort of inadvertently ended up sort of with a kind of journal therapy model for my programs, where I sort of prepare. So for Shine, there's a kind of a workbook that goes along with each session, and I'll kind of brief the exercise, and then the kids will write or draw their responses, and then I might get them to share back, maybe, depending on the room, because some of them wouldn't even say a word. So or I might go round the room and kind of peer over their shoulders and go, oh yeah, you know, and then maybe mention what they've said, but in a general sense, so they don't have to say it. I find that it's not a coincidence that a lot of these kids express themselves through art, music, and writing, you know, through different means. And, you know, some of them are more chatty, but taking the emphasis away from talking as the primary kind of means of communication. And I was thinking, are they gonna not want to write anything because they've just been in class and maybe they've, you know, been writing essays and stuff? But no, they love it. They're like, because it's about themselves, so they sit there writing for ages, and it's just hard for me sometimes to not interrupt them too soon, you know. I have to give them time to download everything that they want to say. And so it's become a sort of almost, I suppose it wasn't really accidental, because that would be how I would have liked to have done it and would prefer to still. Yeah, it seems surprising that more things are not run in that way, actually, where you're kind of writing your responses. But I love that chat storm thing, Pete. That sounds really cool. And also the sort of dramatic kind of effect at the end, that it all just kind of that seems really cool. Oh, and instantly, I used to work back in the day for an innovation company, and we had to go into companies and help them have ideas. And the best way of brainstorming, we didn't do the kind of shouting out brainstorming, that just didn't happen. We did groups of 3. There was a scribe. You kind of briefed an exercise, and then people wrote down the ideas, and then you put them on the wall and you voted for the best ideas with post-it notes, which I think was quite effective. But yeah, there wasn't that sort of pressure to yell out, and I think that was much better.
Thank you, Nadia. So lots more ideas and things that I'm sure many of you in the group are wondering, oh, I wonder if that could work for me with this group. I wonder if this other thing might support learners over here or people I'm working with in this team. I'm keen to give you the opportunity to notice what you're noticing so far, notice what's sparking ideas for you, maybe other things that you're wondering about that you'd like us to bring into the conversation. I'll do a proper go through the chat and make sure I don't miss anything that's been in there as well. I've noticed Jane, for example, had shared about somebody that she worked with and the drama and acting being something that helped that individual to kind of come to life. And I'm sure there are other bits like that that will come to life in the chat. So when we give you the opportunity to do so, those of you that would prefer not to be speaking with others and would rather be in a space on your own, please just send me a DM, and then I can make sure I don't put you in a room and force you to talk to other people. So please do just let me know and I'll accommodate that. So we're going to open them up, and I will put 10 minutes on the clock for you to have a quick chat, and then bring you all back in again and draw questions out. So just bear with me 2 seconds. It's you in groups of 3 to 4. I'm just checking if anybody's DM'd me. Oh, and I'm so sorry. Yes, I meant to highlight Zoom's changed the way in which it lets you share messages individually. There's a little blue square with a kind of a pencil and a notepad, it kind of looks like. And if you click on that, you get a list of all of the names of the attendees, and then you can find my name and DM me that way. Apologies, those of you that wasn't clear for. So I'm just making note of those who've requested. So please bear with me so I can make sure I put you all together. And I'll put you all together, but you don't need to talk to each other. So you just pop your cameras off and everybody will know to use the space in the most appropriate way for yourselves. 2 more. And... Right, so we've got a lovely room with quite a few of you that wanted to be self-reflecting. So please rest assured I have received your message, and nobody will be expecting you to chat. Everybody else, you're in groups to continue the conversation, and when we all come back together, I'll draw out the rooms from those of you that might like to share, and of course you can use the chat function then as well. So make sure I've got 10 minutes on and 30-second countdown. Enjoy.
Brilliant. Welcome back. And we've just been talking while you've been away about some of the things that have come up in chat, and we want to make sure that we address those before we close down, because the time has just absolutely flown. And the first thing that I just want to address, because I think I can do it pretty quickly, is Georgie's question about the need for privacy. I think the things are very closely interlinked, and yes, I'll often work with quieter people, and I very often do a kind of wheel of something with them, often using the traditional model, which does have privacy in there as a category, because I find that some people who are quieter feel an awful lot of pressure, like a pressure cooker, actually, if they don't get a lot of privacy, both at work and at home. And if they don't have privacy at work and they go home and they can't have privacy there either, then it really starts to get problematic. So you're absolutely right about that. There was another lovely observation about intersectionality and the intersectionality between trauma and neurodiversity in coaching. I think the truth of the matter is there's an awful lot of there's more intersectionality around than we actually acknowledge. Lots of people have a number of different things influencing their behavior. And if we miss that, we are losing an opportunity to coach them at depth. The traditional coaching models, a lot of them rely on auditory processes. And of course, we don't exist in human beings communicating solely in an auditory way. There are feelings and there are somatics and there are our connectedness with the world underneath all that. And then there's the whole thing about how we look at and identify ourselves. And we can't leave any of those things off the table. I've written a little bit about it in the Leader's Guide to working with quiet people, but we can't ignore it. It's there. I can't be specific about how I address it in my coaching because it would be different depending on who I was working with and the conversation we had. I would say, though, that precisely that degree of intersectionality is what means we should do very thorough kind of discovery calls and really good contracting so that we know where we can go, we know what the client's interested in exploring, and we can do so safely. And the client is also in control of their levels of self-disclosure and the way the coaching moves forward. So I hope that that's been helpful. It's as brief as I can make it, really. Jane, back to you.
So fabulous, Pete. Thank you. And as promised, we wanted to provide the opportunity for anything coming back from the breakout rooms to find its way in as well. So please do feel free to unmute yourself, bring your voice into the space if there's anything you'd like to ask or share or particular reflection. We've got space for a couple before we completely close down the call this evening. Of course, feel free to share in the chat if you would rather, and we will read the questions out.
Hello.
Can hear a voice. Might need to dive.
Divya.
Well, there we go. I can hear you now. Divya, hi.
Hi. Something which is just coming to me at this moment, when the coaches are working with organizations to support quiet people, what's the response like? How accepting are they, and how do they see, what impact are they expecting from the coaching program?
Maybe say a few words to this one, if I may. Most organizations that I speak with who are interested in bringing me in as a coach often see quietness as a problem. And they're bringing somebody in because somebody has a problem of being too quiet to get to a leadership position. So we have some work to do. We have some work to do in, that one-on-one coaching with the person who they do want to build. But what they're actually saying is this person maybe lacks confidence or is looking for some tools, going back to what we talked about right at the beginning, to build muscles in things where they're not yet so strong yet. And often we go on a big voyage of discovery of identifying true strengths that they never realized were strengths before, and are suddenly brought to the forefront, and they are flying after that. But we also have some work to do with the organization who brought me in the first place to go, this person needs fixing. And you can imagine what the conversations are there with the line manager, with the team, with the ways of doing. And we talk also about some of the things we've spoken today. How do we make space for quieter voices? How do we start to recognize and celebrate the missing piece of the jigsaw that they often bring in those rooms? And how do we also have a conversation in the team and the leadership about leadership itself? What does it mean to be a good leader? Is it being able to give the biggest speech of your life, the rallying cry from the stage, or can it be other things? So yeah, often the starting point and what they ask for is not what they get. And normally that works out very well. But I have had a few furrowed brows of like, oh gosh, this is more than we thought. But that's a bit my experience, at least.
Thank you, Sarah. And I just set another Sarah's hand, Sarah Jane. Hi.
Sorry, my computer's doing funny things today. Yes, I just wanted to thank all three of you. It's just been so interesting. And all of you, I've just made lots of notes, which I often don't do on these things, but and really just to echo, it made me smile when Sarah was saying, you know, that they see quietness as a problem. Most of the coaching I do, not all, but a lot of it is with UN organizations, United Nations organizations, so great big organizations that are quite kind of reactionary, quite hierarchical, and it's often brought up in coaching conversations by leaders saying, you know, they've had a 360, and one of the things that's been told is that they need to be able to speak up more to be able to get promoted. and I think a lot of my work with them has been to kind of go, really, and you know, and work with them to recognize that you know, and support them in that, and I guess challenging that a bit, like Pete said, with how's that served you in the past, and where do you want to go with it. I don't mostly get the opportunity, unfortunately, to have that conversation with the organization itself, because I do that coaching as an associate coach, and so I'm not, you know, directly in touch with the HR department. I would say that with UNDP, who's the organization I do most of my coaching with, and it's not scientifically proven this, but I like to think that over the last 6-7 years that I've been working with them, I'm seeing more and more senior leaders who've been promoted into senior positions who I would say identify as being quieter, and their power is just very different, and they kind of so I don't know, I just feel in a very kind of non-scientific way that the organization is beginning to change, and they are putting those people who resist being like that into senior leadership positions, and that makes me so joyful. But anyway, it's just been fascinating. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Sarah.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah. And just because of timing, echo the gratitude for having all three of you as speakers here this evening. I do feel that part of the shifting and the changing of expectations, perceptions, you know, demands, in terms of the reward systems that we have, right from the school system that we've talked about quite a lot in the space today, because it's still largely so instrumental in what is being inputted into the conditioning that then gets carried into teenage years and adult life, right? Everybody that shows up in our coaching spaces is the product of what's come before, and so we're seeing day to day, even those of us that don't work with children, the impact of what's happened often in childhood. So I feel that these sorts of conversations and the books and the circulating of the books that all three of you have written is something really impactful and powerful that we can do, each of us, to go out into the world and have more of these conversations, think about how we ask questions, think about how we set up certain facilitations of things, how we're parenting for those of us that are parents. There's so many ripples that can come from this sort of discussion, I believe. I know I'm taking a lot from it myself. I've learned a huge amount from each of you tonight, so thank you, all of you. And I really look forward to staying in contact and watching what you do next in the world with your wonderful work. So thank you, and thank you to everybody. Thanks, sorry, Nadia.
Just thank you for inviting us. It's been really interesting, and it's nice to be with other like-minded people.
Thank you. And to everybody that's joined this evening as well, because you make these events what they are by being here. It wouldn't be the same, of course, if you weren't filling the space and being engaging in the way you are. So thank you for all your contributions. Those that asked questions in the chat, brought yourselves bravely off mute and asked questions. I want to share and make sure before you all leave that I give you the links you need to get your CCEUs. So this session and all of our sessions carry CCEU credits. For those of you that are coaches, you'll know it's incredibly important to collect these up so that you've got them when you come to re-accredit. So there's a link there for you to click, and you need to do it within 24 hours of the course. So please do it as soon as you come off, get it done, and then your CCUs will wing their way over to you. And as I said, I would share the link for our, well, it's the details of our next meetup. The link is about where the place is and how to find it. And on the LinkedIn group for the UK Bath and Bristol group, you will find more event details of all of our upcoming events. So if you're not a member of that LinkedIn group, do just search for it and ask to be added, and then you'll see updates on all of the other events that we have. It's been a pleasure as always being here, and especially having Pete, Sarah and Nadia here tonight. So thank you again, all three of you, and goodbye, and see you all sometime soon, I hope. Take care.
Thank you all so much.
Bye.